This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. This episode is brought to you by BNC Pro, the brand spanking new digital wealth platform featuring an all-in-one suite of customizable institutional grade applications that help you manage your crypto investments. Yes, research, chart, screen, analyze, optimize, report, and more. BNC Pro is the ultimate portfolio tool for individual or enterprise use. Streamline your workflow, manage your crypto, and master this brave new asset class your way with BNC Pro. Go to bnc-pro.com now to create your free account, or just look for the link in the show notes to this episode. Now, on with the show. My guest today is Torsten Hoffman. Torsten is a producer and documentary filmmaker who has completed 2 full-length cryptocurrency films, Bitcoin: The End of Money as We Know It from 2015, and his new film, which is called Cryptopia, Bitcoin, Blockchains, and the Future of the Internet. And this has just been released online. And there are different ways you can watch his new film depending on where you are in the world, which I think we'll explain very soon. Welcome to the show, Torsten.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's nice to be on your show because we've met obviously in Auckland not so long ago. And so, yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you on, Torsten, and you're exactly right. We did meet last year and I was lucky enough to see, I suppose you'd call it an early test cut of your new film, and that was a great experience.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've noticed the new version of the film, or the final version of the film, is shorter and tighter and ready for prime time. I hope you agree, at least. I
do agree, and look, we've been talking about that a little bit this week, back and forth. But yes, I watched the film a couple of days ago, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it's a nice summary, a snapshot of what's been happening across the wider cryptocurrency ecosystem over the last 2 years, and then you do a good job of looking forward, I think, to see what the potential of this new technology is. Look, we'll talk about all this. I think what I'd like to do just at the start of the show, Torsten, I think it would make sense if we get this out of the way, and if you just quickly explain how people can see the film, and then we'll start to talk about the film itself.
Sure. So Cryptopia film is available at cryptopiafilm.com. You know, the whole idea of our industry is to cut out the middleman. So we do like the Facebooks and Googles and Amazons and iTunes, but we don't like that they take so much commission. So please support independent filmmakers. Go to cryptopiafilm.com. But as you alluded to earlier, for New Zealanders, there's something very special going on this week and next week. We have been selected at Dockage, which is a film festival that has an Academy Award qualifying status, which means that we are like one big step closer to the Oscars in many ways. And for Kiwis, they can get the film at the Dockage festival website this week and next week. And after that, obviously on my website as well.
Fantastic. And look, links to the online festival and to your website, they will be in the show notes to this episode, listeners. But I thought it was interesting, Torsten, just to touch base on this New Zealand Dockage Film Festival. So I think most people know that, you know, Brave New Coin is based in New Zealand, so I'm in New Zealand right now. And the weird thing, or weird's the wrong word, but the funny thing about this festival, Torsten, is that it is an online-only festival. And look, on their website, they say, in consideration of the COVID-19 pandemic and New Zealand's robust efforts to keep everyone healthy, inspired, and motivated, we are proud to introduce an entirely online film festival. The one thing that's slightly ironic about this, Torsten, is that New Zealand is probably the only country in the world right now that is not under any kind of lockdown. So we, obviously the borders are closed. The film theatres, I think they're closed as well. They're slowly reopening. But apart from that, we are pretty much back to normal activities.
Yeah, it's so great to hear. And your government and Prime Minister has been getting lots of praise. Actually, similar to Germany. I'm kind of stuck in Germany at the moment. And I think the crisis is kind of over here as well, at least for the time being. And look, I have actually been a little bit of a victim of this whole Corona crisis because my original plan was to go travel around the world with a cinema tour and maybe 12, 13 different countries. And after 5 countries, I had to stop because all the cinemas closed down, which is a big shame. I wanted to make money with this film after making it for so long, two plus years. So that's the downside. But the upside is, those festivals are happening online now. I just got off a call with Luxembourg. There were 30 people in that session. And it's a different way to enjoy a movie, I guess.
Yes, indeed. And so you said you're in Germany, and I remember we were emailing 6 weeks or so ago, and I think that was around when, am I right in saying you kind of got trapped in Germany? And so is that you had to make the tough decision then just to say, well, hey, we're stuck in the pandemic and it's not going to improve anytime soon? Is that when you just decided to put the movie out online?
Yeah, no other choice, right? And it's probably the right decision because people are locked at home and hopefully watching some documentaries, especially towards the end of the lockdown when people don't have any more things on Netflix or Amazon to watch. So I think it was the right decision. And also I was raised and I was born and raised here in Germany. So I'm in my hometown and no complaints. So I know this period has been tough on many people, but I'm kind of lucky in a way.
Fantastic. Just to finish off on that, New Zealand, the documentary festival here, or the online film festival here, there's a screening this Saturday at 11 a.m. and on Monday, 29 June at 7 p.m. So that's strictly for people who are listening here in New Zealand if you do want to see the film. Anyway, just go to the website that's in the show notes. But what I wanted to say, Torsten, is you said it's an Oscar qualifying film festival. So I'd love to just understand what that means. And do you think, what are your chances here?
Yeah, so it's also something that I've just recently learned. So the Academy Awards is actually not a film festival itself. They select, so the Academy selects from certain film festivals. And you probably have heard about the Berlinale and Cannes and Sundance and all those kind of prestigious film festivals that people imagine. And documentaries just the same. So there's a couple of film festivals that are in that elite circle. And if your documentary has been selected at one of those, you basically have crossed a big threshold because there's maybe 10,000 documentaries or factual content pieces being made every year, but only maybe 200 movies or documentaries will ever get nominated or selected in those festivals. And then the next step would be, to win an award and then to get selected. Then you have to have certain American cinema prerequisites to fill, and then you get shortlisted. I mean, it's a long journey. And I think for a niche film like this, I mean, this film is really for the blockchain community, for the crypto people, for the Bitcoiners. I'm not sure whether we are quite ready for an Oscar, but we're a long way away from normal films.
Fantastic. Hey, best of luck on your Oscar journey, whether or not that takes place. Torsten, let's rewind a little bit then, and I'd love just to hear you define what it is you do and who you are, because I think, like, all creatives today, you're probably not easily pigeonholed. So while you are what I would describe as a documentary filmmaker, I think you do other things as well. Give me a little bit of your background here. How do you define who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm a content creator, like many of us. You're right. My background is business, and I run a media company. I've been running it for 8 or 9 years out of Australia, where usually I'm based. And I've been working with filmmakers and documentary makers for a long time. And when Bitcoin came along, and I immediately kind of connected this to a paper I had written during my MBA time about alternative currencies. And that was the moment when I'm like, yes, I get it. I need to make my first own documentary. That was 2013-14. And the first film then, Bitcoin, The End of Money, was released 2015. And 5 years later, it was time for a follow-up. And Cryptopia is a much bigger, much more ambitious, much grander movie, bigger budget, and pretty ambitious in scope.
Yes, it certainly is. So, well, I'd love you to just kind of compare and contrast the two films, or maybe just give us just the kind of the snapshot of your first film and what you think perhaps the message was there, because that came out in 2015. So I'm sure you spent a year or so making that film.
Yeah, so I think the film Bitcoin, The End of Money as we know it is still a pretty good intro to the history of money, banking, central banking, and why Bitcoin kind of matters and why it works. And in many ways, it's still accurate, and I wouldn't change anything. In fact, I've just released it at I licensed it to a YouTube channel 3 days ago, and it already has over 100,000 views, 5,000 likes, 600 comments. So it's insanely popular still. Which shows that maybe now the time has come for Bitcoin, right? And yeah, so maybe that's a good intro that I made back then.
The new film then is called Cryptopia, Bitcoin, Blockchains, and the Future of the Internet. And look, we should also point out that while it's called Cryptopia, that has absolutely zero to do with the one-time quite popular New Zealand cryptocurrency exchange, which unfortunately closed down a year or two ago, right?
Yes, correct. So no affiliation, no content about them. We kind of built the film, I'm sure you noticed, around all these narratives that exist in that space, all these crypto utopian ideas, one by one. And that's why the name Cryptopia came about. Yeah, so it's really a 3-act structure. So we start with Bitcoin because that's the most important and the first project. And then we look at some of the blockchain projects, some of the private blockchain projects, the ICO scams. That was a fun little chapter as well. And then we end up talking about what you earlier said is kind of the future, or might be the future. So the whole Web 3.0 story about maybe creating a new kind of internet based on blockchain technology.
Yes, indeed, Torsten. And without giving too much of the film away, I'd love to just touch base on some of those narratives that you've pointed out. But first, maybe why don't you talk about the process of making this film, because, you know, while you watch the film, you can see that you've obviously spent time in a number of different global locations. So that must have been a little bit of a logistical challenge, and I'm sure that you didn't have an unlimited budget, but you've obviously put this together with really high production standards.
Yeah, thanks so much for noticing this. It has really been quite an effort, and there's helicopter shots in there, 3D graphics that we commissioned, and we shot on 4 continents, 7 countries, I believe. It's quite the effort, and part of the struggle was financing it. And luckily in Australia we have Screen Australia, which is the film commission there, and a German broadcaster also put in co-production money, which means we will be on the largest German television channel later this year. And then making it, traveling around the world and talking to the big brains and big egos was kind of fun. And the challenge there is, of course, how do you cut 80 hours of materials into 80 minutes, right? And it's such a shame to sometimes have such great characters and the need to cut them down into 35-second soundbite. But you know, it just goes. You have to have that flow. A documentary like this, a cinema documentary, is really just to get the best bits and pieces. This is not a podcast. This is not a YouTube stream where there's a lot of information that you can convey. No, we want to get the drama. We want to get the emotions out of the people to really create a narrative that is interesting to watch.
This is what I noticed myself when I watched the film again this week compared to the test screening last year. And I think you told me that you'd cut out 15 minutes from that original cut, but boy, it makes a difference. And I think you just moved a few bits around, but it's amazing. I noticed this myself just on a smaller scale with podcasting. It's amazing what you can achieve in the edit suite, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, my background is business, and I'm part of the crypto community, obviously, but I'm not an editor. And my co-director, Michael, he has been a veteran filmmaker for 20, 30 years, and having professionals help me with especially the editing part is crucial. And I must say this because my name is on the film, I do the promotion, and I'm in the film, but of course it's a huge team effort. And thanks again, you asked about this earlier. I think we had 6 different crews in all these shoots, and the logistical effort. Maybe the best example is the famous bunker scene. To get the crew in there, that was quite the James Bond story as well.
Okay, well, look, I was going to ask you about that. So let's just briefly explain what that is then for the listeners, because that's certainly one of the highlights of the film. So look, take it away. What's the famous bunker scene? Yeah, sure. So in Silicon Valley, I met one of the OGs, Vences Casares. He's been called the patient zero of Bitcoin in Silicon Valley very early on, and his company Zappo is famous for onboarding people to Bitcoin, especially in emerging markets, but also custody, self-custody solutions, which in his case means that they store the private keys, the Bitcoin passwords, in secret locations on 5 continents in secret bunkers. And one of those locations is the European, the Swiss one. And we were able to get permission to film there as first camera crew. And I can tell you the clearances and the passport checks and the padding down is nothing compared to, I don't know, airport checks or something. It's madness. And then you go into that former military installation with nuclear grade doors, many doors, levels deep, and you go into an elevator even further down that mountain, where then ultimately those servers are being held offline, where 1/5 of your Bitcoin password is stored super securely. No way that ever, this could be stolen or hacked. Yes, and look, he's described it as a James Bond-esque style scene, and that's exactly what it feels like. Did they, were you blindfolded when they were sort of driving you to that location, or was it just so wild and remote that you wouldn't be able to find your way back anyway? Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I was very careful to have all our GPS signals off and not to make any private photos, and we obviously had to clear all that footage. Maybe you noticed there's some little let's say stickers on the servers or the security doors, some of the codes or the cameras and stuff we had to blur out according to the security officer's instructions. So this was kind of like a James Bond scene. You said earlier, you talked about meeting and filming with the big brains and the big egos of the wider blockchain ecosystem, and that's such a good way, Torsten, to describe some of the bigger personalities in our wonderful industry. There's certainly some big brains and big egos on display in your film. So, just to run through a couple of the names, you've got people like Vitalik, Roger Ver, Samson Mow, Laura Shin, and of course Craig Wright as well. So yeah, as I say, big brains, big egos. Was it easy to book time with some of these personalities? Yeah, some were more difficult than others. Wences was kind of tough to get, but in general, it was easy because I could prove that I had a track record with my first film, right? I'm sure they get tons of requests and turn many down, but in terms of being in a documentary, I mean, they all want to sell us their story. They all want to sell us their coin. As long as I'm aware of that, that's fine. And sometimes this whole 2-hour interview that we film with someone might just be condensed into a few seconds, where they get passionate about one thing or get angry about another thing. And that's the whole fun of making a film like this. Yes, indeed. And look, I said I didn't want to give too much of the film away, but I think I'd love to just touch on a couple of the key narratives. So, one is, I guess it's what Samson Mow always describes as the Bitcoin civil war, right? So on one side, and this is going back to 2017, so you've got Samson Mao and Blockstream and Bitcoin core devs, and I guess a lot of the Bitcoin holders as well. And then on perhaps the other side, if you can call it sides, and we probably have to, you've got Roger Ver, Bitmain, perhaps Craig Wright, and the sort of the tension between what was happening there, which was really, I suppose it boils down to Bitcoin as digital cash versus Bitcoin as digital gold, right?
100% right, and I'm sure you've covered this both on your podcast and on Brave New Coin as well. But look, I think the one thing that I do want to mention here is that it's important to know that this is not a fanboy film, right? Because who would want to, there's no German broadcaster that will show a pro Ethereum or pro Bitcoin Cash or whatever project film on their television channel to 40 million homes, right? It must be a journalistic enterprise. And it's also important not to whitewash history, right? So I am talking about Bitcoin Jesus, because he used to be Bitcoin Jesus and then he became Bitcoin Judas. And why? And what are his motivations? And I leave everyone enough space to kind of voice their opinions. There's a little bit of drama, which we need to make it interesting. But I think I'm trying not to place myself too much like in favor of this person or that person. It's up to the viewer to decide what kind of narrative they follow best, even though I think at the end of the film it is clear I'm a fan of the technology overall, and I'm a fan of maybe Bitcoin as the most decentralized of all the projects, but that doesn't mean everything else is a scam.
Oh, that is wonderfully said, Torsten. And look, I very much agree with that. And one thing I did notice, now that you point that out, I did notice that while you follow that Bitcoin civil war and the split or the fork, which resulted in Bitcoin Cash, and then, not to dwell on Mr. Craig Wright, but you do have a very funny scene with Craig Wright towards the end of the movie, and I think you're very fair to Craig. But at the same time, you certainly point out that his claims have been fairly well disproven. But you don't even mention by name the subsequent fork from Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, I might do a little, but look, I mean, we could talk hours and hours about each project or each controversy, and I'm not. This is not a film as who is Satoshi or who about individual scams or this or that. What I do find interesting about the Craig Wright chapter is something that nobody else is really talking about, is the whole patenting bit, right? I mean, you can think of him what you want, and people have strong opinions about him and his crew, but I mean, the fact is he has hundreds of patents coming forth, right? And nobody else talks about it, and I don't know whether they're enforceable in a court of law, but it is kind of funny that this open source movement, this crypto anarchist movement, how it started, and now has someone going after patenting hundreds and hundreds of ideas. So I make that point, and I'm getting some people attack me for having him in the film at all, but I'm also getting praise for how I handle this situation, and to point out things that maybe other people overlook.
Look, again, great points, Torsten, and I very much agree. From just a pure entertainment perspective, the drama and the flamboyance that Craig Wright provides from just as I say, a visual entertainment perspective is quite spectacular, and I think you are very fair to both him and the viewers. And yeah, I mean, you can't really ask for more than that. But that patent thing, you're exactly right, because it's such a it's a real split from the open source decentralized thesis that is a blockchain, and
something similar that is also maybe worth mentioning, right? So we are talking about this new decentralized, fairer future, but a lot of these projects, let's be honest, are pretty centralized, and there's still new leaders in charge calling the shots, and we see those news every other week, and I'm sure you are covering that space much closer and more day to day than I am. So this is something, again, to point out, because we need to be fair to people who are maybe not fans of the technology, right? And I have a critic in the film who does make good points and does criticize some of the aspects of this movement.
Yes, and look, just as kind of if we were taking a helicopter view of the movement really from the beginning. And you set this up really well at the start of the film. You know, you have a little clip from John Oliver's notorious 2018 piece on Last Week Tonight, and you know, it's such a great quote when he says, Bitcoin, it's everything you don't understand about money combined with everything you don't understand about computers. And that's just such a good way of explaining Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, no, we try to have a little bit of fun every couple of minutes, some inside jokes and some other jokes, and it was great to have this experience in a movie theater, right? We did one big one in Melbourne, a big event in Berlin as well, where there's hundreds of people in the room, and there's this energy, and that just gets me every time. So that's maybe a little bit of a shame with this COVID situation, that we all now have to watch a feature documentary made for cinemas on a smaller screen.
Well, look, let's just finish off talking about the film, Torsten. I just want to touch on maybe the final third of the film, the third act, which is really about looking forward to, you know, building out Web 3.0 or the decentralized internet, the internet of value, you know, whatever we want to call it. And this is the part of the movie I enjoyed the most, because you do a really nice job in sort of looking back to the early days of the internet, right? And, you know, the same way that you talk about the same way how there are what you, I guess, call, you know, blockchain battles or protocol battles in the early days of blockchain right now. The same happened in the early days of the internet, right?
Yes, that was fun to shoot. We went to the Computer History Museum in Silicon Valley, and we talked to the co-inventor of the internet, TCP/IP, which was, that man is a legend, obviously. And there are many similarities. I mean, it's always hard to draw too many parallels between different, worlds and technologies. But it is true. There was a battle of the protocols, and it wasn't necessarily the first one. It wasn't necessarily the best funded one that succeeded. So I think that is kind of interesting. Another historic episode there is how this professor in Oxford talks about how technologies evolve and how then standards establish themselves, and then it moves much quicker afterwards. And he talks about this shakeout. So in his example of an industry, there was a shakeout of let's say there were 300, 400 providers, and then after the first crisis, after the first crash, there were maybe only 20 or 30 left. And then there's another shakeout and only 2 or 3 are left standing. And I'm like, yes, isn't that exactly what happened in 2017 with the ICOs? And who knows who's going to be the last man standing in crypto? My bet is still on Ethereum and Bitcoin, but there's probably a few players that are not on our radar at the moment.
Yes, indeed. Torsten, why don't we just finish off on the film then? Just really quickly, again, please tell people where they can go to watch the film.
Cryptopia Film is available on cryptopiafilm.com. Cut out the middleman, go directly to the source and support independent filmmakers. And this film is by and for the community for sure, but I think also your friends who still don't quite get it, or maybe some family members might enjoy this too. It's made in a way that's really a conversation starter, and I've seen it at many events. Feel free to share, spread the word.
And look, listeners, if you are listening to this but you haven't yet watched the film, then I highly recommend that you do. I really enjoyed it. And as Torsten said, I think it's, you know, there's something in here for everyone, whether you're really new to the space, it provides a great introduction. But if you're already deep in the ecosystem, then you'll just get so much entertainment from the situations that Torsten manages to put himself into. Hey, Torsten, just before we go to a break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off with the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round. But, you know, what's next for you now that you've got this film out and people can watch it? What do you do next?
Yeah, at one point I need to decide whether to continue a world tour. Are the cinemas really going to open up? Are people in New York or San Francisco or Denver interested to invite me to have big events? Or maybe that world is gone, and I have to stop that idea. I might make a new film if I sort out the funding, but it's hard to tell now. I just started promoting this one, and it's a long way to recoup that production budget.
Best of luck in recouping that budget, and I hope people do continue to watch the film, because I think it's fantastic. All right, let's go to a very quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off with the Crypto Conversation hot take round.
Whether you're an enterprise fund manager or a retail trader, buying and selling cryptocurrencies successfully requires price discovery you can rely on. Brave New Coin's liquid indices provide trusted US dollar prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. Featuring end-of-day or intraday outputs, you can count on the BLX, ELX, and XRPLX for accurate US dollar pricing for smart contract oracles, settlement price discovery, net asset valuation, and performance analysis. Visit bravenewcoin.com to find out more.
All right, we are back, and I'm with Torsten Hoffman. Torsten is the director and producer of a fantastic new cryptocurrency documentary film. It's called Cryptopia: Bitcoin, Blockchains, and the Future of the Internet. And of course, that is out now, online, and available to watch. Torsten, I like to finish each podcast with a very quick round of crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Let's do it.
All right, I just want your hot takes, your hot fire. Take your best shot. Here we go. Torsten, where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
A solid 8.
Nice and concise. I like it. All right, Torsten, what would you say is your firmest conviction, crypto opinion?
That Bitcoin stands for freedom, and slightly related to that, cutting out the middleman, because that is kind of like what blockchains can do.
Fantastic. Okay, look, I ask every guest this question. Neither you or I live there, but, you know, it's sort of interesting and, you know, maybe has ramifications for the world going forward. Who do you think wins the American presidential election 2020?
I wouldn't trust Joe Biden with getting my lunch order right or remembering it, but it looks like he might win this thing. I don't know. It's such a crazy circus there. I'm trying to avoid it.
All right, you and me both. Hey, Torsten, Bill Gates, he famously said, we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. What do you think the blockchain space looks like in 10 years' time?
I'll start with Bitcoin. I think we will see Bitcoin as a reserve currency in some instances, in some countries, in some investment funds and so forth. We will certainly see Bitcoin and maybe some of the other coins establish themselves as a digital asset class for sure. I don't think that in 10 years' time we will ubiquitously use cryptocurrency as a means to transact, so as a medium of exchange. I don't think that's happening quite that fast globally. And finally, on the Web 3.0 aspect, I believe that we might see 2 or 3 interesting use cases where people use blockchain technology, maybe in the background without even knowing that it is blockchain based, their browser or whatever app they might be using.
Yes, very sensible. I think I agree with most of your theses there, Torsten. Okay, well, similarly, sci-fi author William Gibson said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough to run a virtual reality company for a little while, and this is one of the overhyped technologies, also with a very long history. And during that time, I was fortunate to see some of the prototypes and some of the labs, and even back in those days. And of course, there came the big crash, and everybody thinks this technology is dead, but it's clearly not, and it will make a reemergence. And there's interesting stuff coming out in the next couple of years. So virtual reality is my answer.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think the thing with VR is, and I'm sure you know this much better than me, Torsten, but I think there was so much hype early, and then, of course, you know, it needs to go through that hype cycle, right? And then through the trough of disillusionment. And where are we on that hype cycle then, do you think?
Look, the answer to that question is always on the slope of enlightenment. But, you know, I've said that about so many technologies over so many years, so many times that I stopped believing it myself. Look, I don't know. It's so hard to get the timing right.
Let's zoom out, Torsten. We're almost done here. What do you think is the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
Well, we're seeing dystopia in our everyday lives at the moment, so I'm going to go with utopia for the midterm and long-term future.
Very nice. Let's fingers crossed. Okay. Finally, Torsten, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, show, or universe?
Yeah, isn't it funny that all of us are like sci-fi nerds in many ways? It's so interesting. I'm going to go with The Matrix. I continue to rewatch it, and it's just decades ahead of its time. It's a masterpiece creatively, storytelling-wise. But in terms of my favorite universe, I'm going to go with Star Trek because it kind of shows the spirit of exploration and so many positive things what the human race could potentially do, and everything is so optimistic and positive, and I like to end the conversation on that note.
Okay, wonderfully said, Torsten. And look, it's Star Trek as a sci-fi universe is always a popular answer around here because, you know, you've been to the Brave New Coin offices, so I don't know if you noticed, but you know, Fran, shout out to Fran, CEO of Brave New Coin, and he is a major Star Trek nerd, and so all the meeting rooms at the Brave New Coin offices are named after different parts of the Star Trek universe.
Very cool.
All right. Well, thank you for talking to us today, Torsten. This has been a lot of fun. Nothing else really to say. I know you've hyped the film a couple of times, but look, the microphone is yours. Please tell the people where they can go to follow you on your various platforms, find out more about the film, and of course, watch the film.
Yeah, I'm going to give my email address here, producer@cryptopiafilm.com, for anyone who wants to get in touch or has any idea what to do with this film or my first one. Then you can find me mostly on Twitter. Cryptopia Film is the handle. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I don't really use the other social networks. And the film is available at cryptopiafilm.com. And again, cut out the middleman, get it directly from the filmmaker. Thanks.
Awesome. Hey, thank you, Torsten. All the best.
Thank you so much indeed. Bye.
Boom, there you go. That was today's episode. Thank you to Torsten Hoffman. Of course, that film, Cryptopia, Bitcoin, Blockchains and the Future of the Internet. If you do want to see it, and I highly recommend that you watch it. As I said, I've watched the film twice now. Did really enjoy it. Great cast of colourful crypto characters and exotic locations and flamboyant situations. Slightly strange way of describing it, but I think you'll very much enjoy it. So do go to cryptopiafilm.com and you can watch the film there. If you are listening from New Zealand, cryptopiafilm.com as well that will link you through to that online documentary festival that we talked about as well. Don't forget, the Crypto Conversation is sponsored by BNC Pro, the digital wealth platform featuring an all-in-one suite of customizable institutional-grade applications that help you manage your crypto investments. BNC Pro is the ultimate portfolio tool for individual or enterprise use. Just go to bnc-pro.com and you can create your free account. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. See you real soon. See you next time. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.